Continuing our Week 9 thoughts as we recap the NFL games, in which we have already talked about on the Monday recap show. A lot of fun. I mentioned 9 being a lucky number for me, and it came through this week. If you have got over the line, congratulations on your W in Week 9. Hopefully Monday Night Football produced what you needed to get that win. Shawn, we are going to start off here, though, with the Packers and the Lions. And this is going to be an interesting one to talk about because I think it's one of those games where it could have been a lot different if the game had been closer, obviously. If the Packers were closer to the Lions may have continued to been able to pile forward and put up points against this Packers defense. But we kind of joked about the rain conditions happening in Arizona, but there was some weather conditions in this game in general. The Packers, particularly as the game progressed, one time in the red zone, fumbled 2 snaps in a row for Jordan Love. So a couple of tricky situations in terms of, people making receptions, different scenarios like that. So we'll talk through it all and see which side we come out on. Shawn did joke, I can't remember if it was on air, Shawn, or off air. You said that the Lions were going to dismantle the Packers this week. Well, it was 17-3 in the second quarter, and I'm like, well, Shawn was right about this one. But there was some very exciting highlight plays on the, I guess you could say, the Jaden Reed side, or else the Lions side. We get a rushing touchdown for Jahmyr Gibbs. He has now got 7 straight games, Shawn, averaging 5 yards per carry on at least 10 attempts. There are 1 players in NFL history that have done that. Their name is Jahmyr Gibbs. So he is, very dynamic, very electric. He takes off on his touchdown run. Obviously, he breaks through the line, but he's gone. It's over. So it's nice to see him starting to get into the end zone in some of those particular plays. Amon-Ra St. Brown had an incredible route and reception on his touchdown catch on 4th down as the Lions continue to be aggressive in those situations. He has a touchdown catch now in 6 straight games. Jared Goff, though, 18 of 22, another efficient day. Just that 1 pass and touchdown, just took 1 sack for 8 yards. Heavy dose of the run, as you would expect from the Lions. 11 carries to Gibbs, 17 for David Montgomery. And then, Amon-Ra St. Brown has the 7 targets, 7 receptions, 56 and a touchdown. But Shawn, outside of that, nobody has more than 3 targets. We get 3 to Laporta, 3 to David Montgomery. So that limits the upside in the passing game for the rest of this offense. Obviously, no Jameson Williams with his suspension. But the other part of it is, I mentioned some of the issues the Packers had. There's more drops for this Packers team. Dontavian Wicks, I know the ball's kind of behind him a little bit. It's a little bit behind him and the weather's bad. But another one where, you're looking at end zone drop. I'm trying to be nice here, Shawn. I didn't get too agitated in Week 9. But when that one went past Wicks, it might just have been like previous weeks building up. But I was like, damn it, Wicks. Just so I was pretty annoyed at that point, as the Packers had some hope of getting into it, but turnovers and different issues like that. The Packers outgained the Lions 411 yards to 262. They moved the ball, I thought, pretty well, but they just couldn't punch it in. They were getting stuck down in the red zone. Drops, penalties kind of killed them as well in this particular game. I thought the snap issues, turning the ball over. And Shawn, I'm just going to say it. We talked about, we give Geno Smith some stick for some of the bad throws, and we were making fun of Kyler Murray for the wide open touchdown that he left with Trey McBride. But Jordan Love throws a pick 6, Shawn, in this that is up there with something that Will Levis would do. And, that was.
Does he get contacted on the arm on this pass?
I don't think so. I think it's just dreadful. I think he thinks he can get it off to Josh Jacobs. And what I honestly think happens is he starts to move to his right. And I think then he realizes, I'm not healthy. And I think some of the decision making maybe went out the window there. He's like, I can't take a sack here. Well, you're better off to take a sack and, not score before the half, because the Packers hold the Lions there to a field goal, and then it's missed. And then Jordan Love throws a pick 6. So you're kind of in a situation where the game at the half, you could be going in 10-17 potential, or sorry, 10-3, but instead you're going in 17-3, and then the Lions, I felt like the Lions were seeing out the game more so than the Packers were getting back into it. But I thought this was just too many mistakes. But like I said about the Seahawks game, I think that if the Packers don't make them mistakes, they have a pretty strong chance to win here. But this is the third time now in a row that the Lions have won in Lambeau as well. So I kind of touched on different parts. I think that's part of the reason why the Lions scoring is not as high as maybe as it could have been. And then I did mention Jaden Reed. He had 6 targets in this, 5 receptions for 113. The chemistry between Love and Reed on some of these plays is sensational in terms of the plays that Jaden Reed's able to make. But outside of that, Shawn, a relatively quiet day for the Packers offensively here.
So Colm, I have another question to ask you too, which is that at the end of the first half, you get a 40-yard completion to Jaden Reed. All of the Lions are signaling incomplete as though there was no possible way that he had caught it. The time does run out. Jordan Love is unable to, in any way, shape, or form, make his way down the field in the direction of where Jaden Reed caught that ball. The officials announce it as a completion, but almost as though like the time has expired, we're not going to waste any time on this. Did Jaden Reed catch that pass?
I was kind of just tilting, Shawn, that that the half ran out, so I did no further investigation into it. I assume you think that you think that he didn't.
Well, I mean, you can usually tell by body language whether the defenders are signaling no catch because they didn't want it to be a catch, or no catch because it clearly hit the ground. It seemed to me a no catch because the ball clearly hit the ground. I obviously was rooting for a catch. I was very excited that didn't get investigated or overturned, what have you, because that's a 5-point play, right, for Jaden Reed. That's a big chunk of what he's going to get in this game. I was especially excited for that because there was a possibility that we would only have like 4 drives for each team in this game. This game starts out with a 14-play, 7-minute and 54-second field goal drive from the Packers, and then we get a 13-play, 70-yard, 7-minute and 10-second touchdown drive from the Lions. At that point, you're like, this feels like intramurals with a running clock. Like, are we going to play a real game here where the teams... So, Colm, the other thing that I was mostly thinking is that I would love for the teams to like get together and hold these games for charity. And you fill the facility, you play in the rain, you play in the snow. Maybe we could get a game where the field is frozen and it's 50 degrees below zero, and some type of pay-per-view where I don't know how many people are going to want to go to the stands, but you can create these spectacles, right, in Green Bay, in the fall, in the winter. But for the actual games, you should build a facility where you can play actual football, because this isn't very fun. Right? You're looking forward all week to Lions Packers, a headline game. You've got Jared Goff. You have all of his crazy playmakers. You have Jordan Love, maybe a little bit limited, all of his playmakers. You've got Matt LaFleur. You've got Ben Johnson. You got the two. I mean, I think you could argue that for 2024 specifically, that maybe you've got the 2 best play callers in the NFL, and what we get is handoff, watching like Lions defenders trying to tackle Josh Jacobs. That's not what we signed up for. Anyway, that's probably completely beside the point. We're not going to get any type of facility like that in Green Bay. It is, I think, too bad for the fans of the Packers and for the fans of their players, because as you mentioned, their guys couldn't catch, right? One of the things that we have talked about throughout the season is that it's a little bit challenging for everyone to get a piece of the pie here when you have Romeo Dobbs, who's looked very good, when you have a Christian Watson who can get deep, when you have a Dontavian Wicks who's open consistently. I don't think that Jaden Reed has been that healthy. He did look very frustrated back in week 8. So part of it, I think, is just that they are having some trouble right now running the offense the way they were before he got injured, before Jordan Love started to deal with these issues. You think back to week 1 before he was dinged up and before Love was dinged up, and you kind of feel like he was going to have an epic season. Obviously, we don't really know, but even in this game where the context was awful, where no one else can catch, where Jordan Love plays relatively poorly simply because he can't move, you still have a nice performance there, which is a relief because the rest of the guys didn't. You don't get much for Dobbs. Wicks, a 0, right? You talk about the drop in the end zone.
It's another
pretty
drop as well.
hypocritical. Yeah, he's really struggling. I mean, I think it's hypocritical for me to say that the interception on Smith in the Seahawks game, even though it hit JSN's hands, not a very good pass. In this game, I think, again, within the context, what Jordan Love does to get that ball to his receiver in the end zone is extremely impressive. And you need the receiver to come through, even though it's a hard play in the rain. Again, more likely than not, that ball's not caught. But at some point, Wicks needs to make a play. The weird thing here, and again, strange conditions, rain, it's going to be tough. There were 2 different plays in this game where Christian Watson is open behind the defenders, the pass is on him, and there's like a depth perception issue where he jumps like 3 yards in front of where the ball's going to land.
Yeah.
So I don't expect that to continue. I mean, that doesn't seem like a ongoing type of problem, but it was super weird. And I'm sure Jordan Love's like, I just threw a 60-yard pass right on you, and at the last second, you dove in a different direction. You don't see that, right? I mean, that's pretty weird. So I think that you could argue that Jordan Love, who goes for 273 in this game, doesn't take a sack. You can see the greatness here, but the injury has, I think, been pretty devastating for their season. I mean, that's straightforward. It's weird to say that coming out and all those touches to Josh Jacobs, which were extremely efficient, he ends up with 13 for 95, right?
137-yard rush as well.
Yeah, so that worked. And yet, because it was so one-dimensional, it set the stage for the problems that they had later. I'm frustrated with LaFleur in this game because, especially with the Lions not really doing a ton, Jared Goff only attempting 22 passes, only completing them for 145 yards. As you mentioned, if they had needed to play more, they probably could have and would have. I would be interested to know, Colm, has there been anything on Gibbs as we record? Because he does subsequently have a couple more electric carries, including the touchdown. He got hit from the side on this one, had his leg jut in a very weird direction. That looked like it hurt. He did seem like he was okay afterward, but I guess I wasn't that surprised that in this game, they went back to Montgomery kind of more than they have, even though in many ways Montgomery was you think about the rain and the weather here, and to me, I could easily see this one being a game where Josh Jacobs, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Montgomery is the most effective of the 3. He was actually the least effective by a pretty good margin. He does also end up with the most touches of the 3, which, a little disappointing for fantasy, depending on, what you're rooting for, what you're rooting against.
Yeah, it does sound, as the time we're recording, there doesn't seem to be anything concerning really with Gibbs. Seems like, if anything, maybe a very light ankle sprain, but everything seems to be pretty positive. You mentioned the other thing with Jordan Love and not being healthy in his injury. I do think if the Packers were playing maybe somebody less than the Lions, you could have seen Malik Willis in this. The Packers do have their bye week coming up now this week, so there's a chance for him and the likes of Jaden Reed to try and get a little bit more healthy. So hopefully that will help them moving forward. But I just felt like a bit like that Seahawks game that we talked about, the Packers with penalties, with drops, situations like that. I think they really just cost themselves too many times in this game to be able to work their way back into it, and they lose by 10. But I did say that the Lions kind of maybe pulled back a little bit. I do think that the Packers defense is starting to be really tough for some of these offenses to play against, and they were able to get the Lions, particularly in that second half, off the field on third down quite a number of times consecutively. But again, maybe down to the conservative nature maybe of some of the play calls. Shawn, the next game to talk about is the Cowboys and the Falcons, and this was one where, what are we doing with the Cowboys, Shawn? I think they're done for the actual NFL season. What are we going to get out of them for the rest of the fantasy season? The big concern coming out of this one is with Dak Prescott. He goes out in the early fourth quarter in this with a hamstring injury, misses the remainder of the game, and that leads to, we're likely to see Cooper Rush in there at quarterback here as we move forward. He goes 13 of 25. That is Cooper Rush when he's in there. Dak Prescott was 18 of 24 for 1 touchdown. Rush does pass for a touchdown as well. This was one where Siegele is also not involved, doesn't travel, is inactive. Rico Dowdle is 12 carries for 75. We also get Dowdle 5 for 32 and a touchdown in the air. 12 targets for CeeDee Lamb, 8 for 47. We get 10 targets to Jake Ferguson, 7 for 71. We also get Jalen Tolbert getting in the end zone, 3 for 19 for him. On the other side, Shawn, Bijan Robinson kind of doing what he has been doing, gets 86 yards on the ground, gets 59 yards in the air, has 7 receptions. Darnell Mooney looked quite good again, I thought, but 9 targets, 5 receptions, 88, and 1 touchdown for him. The kind of talking point coming out of it, Shawn, 1 target for Kyle Pitts, 1 for 11. Drake London has 2 targets, 2 receptions, 27 yards and a touchdown. Unfortunately, on that touchdown catch, which was a really good catch from him, he hurts his hip and then he's out for the remainder of the game. The Falcons winning 27-21. And this one, Kirk Cousins, 3 passing touchdowns, continues to look pretty good, pretty efficient in there overall. Any key takeaways here from the Falcons and the Cowboys?
Certainly you'd like to get more target volume for Pitts in a game where London is out, but the Falcons didn't have to do that much. This game, even though it ends up being 27-21, it felt like it was over forever. And
it wasn't
right now, I mean, Mooney is the guy, right? So you get the 16 combined targets to Mooney and Bijan Robinson. Robinson is doing what we had hoped for from sort of an expected points perspective, that combination of rushing EP and receiving EP. He looks like the absolute perfect running back with the exception of losing that goal line carry to Tyler Algier. I say goal line carry. It was inside the 10, but certainly not
a scrum style touchdown. A rugby scrum to get him into the end zone.
Yeah, I mean, Algier can really push the pile. So that's going to continue to be a bit of an issue. And then Algier is also an above average NFL running back. When he pushes it in here on the sort of the 2 consecutive carries from the 11 and then the 6, you gain 5, you gain 6, you score the touchdown. I don't think that's necessarily a situation where the Falcons are thinking, let's bring in the big back to punch it in. It just sort of happens as the drive moves along. But then when you score from the 6, you're like, well, now it's done. We don't have to decide, who's going to carry from the 1, who's going to carry from the 2, anything like that. The Falcons certainly don't seem like a super team. If you can get some pressure on Kirk Cousins, I think you can give them some issues. In a game like this where they only get the 3 combined receptions from London and Pitts, you would like to think that you're in it. You get a game where Kirk Cousins only throws 24 times. You would like to think that you're in it. But again, the reason you get that is because the Cowboys can't really do anything. The Dallas offense has just been so weird in that it has deteriorated into Prescott dropping back, trying to force the ball to CeeDee Lamb, who's taking all these brutal hits because the defense knows that the ball is coming to him. And this one, he catches 8 for 47. Again, in part because so much of it is just manufactured. He gets the 2 carries as well. They want him to have the ball in his hands. Lamb is one of the best receivers in the NFL with the ball in his hands. And yet all of that is going to be much more dynamic if you can get the ball down the field to him. It's a little bit weird that recently Dowdle has been so effective and yet still really isn't being used. He did have a funny touchdown reception in this game where he drops the ball.
Tips it up in the air.
Tips it into the air. It should have been tipped for an interception, but the defender who's standing right there manages to get grasped at it a couple times and miss it completely. Then it falls down onto Dowdle, who is lying on the ground. He does secure it at that point. I like the fact that he caught it in the end. He has a big game here, even though he doesn't have a huge number of touches. 17 opportunities, certainly not bad in an environment where the Cowboys have used their running backs seldom to Not at all. Basically, though, this game just gave you the feeling of not really an exhibition, but a minor league game. That's where the Dallas Cowboys are right now.
Yeah, they're really struggling at the moment. They had a key third down play early. It might have been the second third down for the Falcons, and they had 10 men on the field on that one. Nobody covering Bijan out of the backfield for an easy carry to get that first down. So there's lots of issues now. They have some quarterback concerns, obviously, with Dak potentially missing some time with a hamstring injury. So we'll see what happens there, and hopefully we can still see CeeDee Lamb pushing forward as a strong fantasy asset the rest of the season. But anytime we see a quarterback change, that can be of concern. Shawn, we did see a quarterback change in the Vegas Raiders versus the Cincinnati Bengals, 41-24 for Cincinnati. Gardner Minshew had 17 pass attempts. He comes out. We get Desmond Ridder in for 16 pass attempts. Both of them similar completion percentages, but we get one passing touchdown from your boy, Desmond Ridder, to your other boy, Brock Bowers. That must have been a special moment for Shawn Siegele. But we get 8 targets for Bowers, 5 receptions, 45 yards, and a touchdown. He does kind of get the day saved with that late touchdown in garbage time, 22-yard touchdown to boost those numbers overall. We get 11 targets for Jakobi Meyers. He goes 8 for 105. Pretty impressive day overall from him. Absolutely nothing in the running game, but we do get 6 carries from Zamir White for the 10 yards, but he does manage to punch it into the end zone. So that is something for the Raiders. They do clean house of pretty much everyone outside of the head coach on Monday. So we'll see if that changes anything, but they are 2-7. We have the Bengals with Shawn. They're 4-5. They obviously started the season like it was preseason. They struggled immensely. Now they beat up on a poor Raiders team, but they do it in style. Joe Burrow has 5 passing touchdowns. He has 1 interception, takes 1 sack, but 251 passing yards. Chase Brown, 27 carries, which we want Chase Brown, Shawn, to get all the work. 27 carries is a lot of carries. 120 yards for him on the ground. He gets 5 targets, 5 receptions, 37 yards. Has a nice grab for his passing or receiving touchdown there. But we got Shawn, Mike Gesicki, who we could say is our boy. 6 targets, 5 receptions, 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. One of those being a 47-yard touchdown. You know when you're like having a fantasy asset, Shawn, in baseball, and you're like, not a lot happening here this season, and you're like, oh, no, I have 25% Mike Gesicki. Well, that's positive. So he has a big day. Chase Brown has a big day. We get 11 targets for Jamar Chase, but just 7 for 43 for him. We obviously had no T. Higgins out for this one, but Mike Gesicki, interested in your thoughts on him rest of season. Has Chase Brown done enough here to vanquish Zach Moss and that backfield with his combined 32 attempts in this one? Any thoughts coming out of the Bengals and the Raiders here?
Well, Chase Brown had some chances for a second touchdown, which would have really capped off what was a sensational game from him. If you're simply looking at the final line with the 4.4 yards per attempt, that doesn't necessarily jump out to you. But if you had watched this game where most of the time he was well above that, the touchdown reception, you mentioned it, he goes 5 for 37 as a receiver. This is a case where they very clearly prefer Zach Moss for pass blocking. In this one, they actually go to some unique formations, fullbacks, tight ends, what have you, in the backfield on some 3rd and longs where they don't, again, want Brown back there. And yet, for the most part, in most of the different contexts, he's so dramatically better, not just than Zach Moss. This isn't something where it's like Zach Moss is awful, so Chase Brown could play. Chase Brown is a top 3rd running back. He might be one of the 10 best running backs in the NFL. His speed is something that only a few guys match. I mean, you're talking about somebody who falls in right after that Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane level, and you could see it throughout this game. You could also see it on that touchdown reception where it's a little bit of a scramble situation. He sees where the space is going to be in the corner of the end zone. And I'm not sure I've ever watched a player in the end zone see where the space is going to be and run to it like he did. The sprints, I would be interested in the sprint speed as he went to the corner of the end zone. He flies and there, he makes the catch. Yeah, and gets both feet in. You love to see Joe Burrow getting the ball to him. I mean, this is a game against a team that, and we talked about just a minute ago, the Cowboys being sort of a minor league team. Certainly the Raiders should be relegated if we had that type of format here. So I don't know how much you can really give to Joe Burrow in a game where he only averages 6.5 yards per attempt, but you love to see the 5 touchdowns. You love to see the fact that they tried to get him a 6 touchdown and a deep garbage time touchdown to Jamar Chase. You're not normally getting those types of plays. I think that we need to have more of it. The NFL has simply been too offense starved for a long time for teams to get ahead and then quit playing. From a sportsmanship perspective, I mean, the fans have paid to see football, right? Let's get after it. Unfortunately, again, if you're playing Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, that ball does get batted away. A really nice defensive play in the corner of the end zone there by the Raiders. You look at what they did on, and I should mention, you talk about Mike Gesicki. He does have the 6 targets, but we also had a couple of targets for Eric All, 4 for Drew Sample, 3 for Tanner Hudson. It almost seemed like Gesicki emerged as an afterthought or an accident in this game where the other players had designed plays for them. All I believe was injured in this game and goes out. If he doesn't, maybe everything is different. You'll want to watch for, and again, the slight gap between when we record and release this, people may have a better sense of where he is. That would open things up for Gesicki, especially if T. Higgins continues to not play football, which at this point I think is probably something that we have to be scared of if you have Higgins on those teams. This is
the one thing, Shawn, to note is you mentioned watching out for, Higgins' status moving forward, but Higgins missed the game against the Chiefs in week 2. Gesicki got 9 targets, 7 receptions, 91 yards. He also missed last week. He gets 8 targets, 7 receptions, 73 yards. And then he missed this week, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 100 yards. So maybe it could be down to All going out. Obviously, they like him as a rookie as well. But there has been the other games then when there hasn't been much involvement for him. But over the last 2 weeks, it's definitely a positive direction for Gesicki. I'm hoping it goes forward. We've always wanted the true Gesicki breakout. It's never got there. Maybe he's sucking us back in one last time.
And this is a game where Andre Yoshivas does score a touchdown.
Shawn, don't steal my note.
Look really good, but he only has that 1 catch on the 4.
Was that the smallest break in the playing touchdown replay you've ever seen? Like, I think they looked and they seen the pixels at the tip of the ball had touched the pixels of the line. You know how I know it only has to touch the line? Have you ever seen one on replay that was that close?
And I was hoping he would be down, so you got a Chase Brown touch, but he was in. He was in.
He was in, but it's the closest I've ever seen, I think, for one of those breaking the plays where it's in, or where they can confirm it rather than going with the play that was called on the field.
But Colm, I want to talk about this Raiders side, because what's happening in Las Vegas is a travesty. You had a chance in the NFL draft to select Bo Nix, and you decided to not do that because you didn't think that he was a starting caliber quarterback. Now, you did select the one player who, regardless of position, is better. I mean, you made a great pick. But then you went into the season and you said, we're going to run the ball, even though the running backs that you have are Zamir White and Alexander Madison. You told the press that we're probably not going to score that many points. I mean, you're telling people that, right? You have Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell as your 2 QBs. I don't know how you think that anything about your plan is going to work. You have to have a viable plan. They gave up 41 points in this game to the Cincinnati Bengals and could have given up more. In what world can you run the ball more with Alexander Madison and give up 41 points and say, we're not going to score very much, and then come out and fire your offensive staff? In what world do you bench Gardner Minshew in which he's taken only a single sack, even though you don't block it all? He's gotten rid of the ball extremely fast. He's got Jakobi Meyers off to a fantastic game, right? Meyers goes 8 for 105 on 11 targets. Gardner Minshew is neutralizing the blitz. He's getting the ball out. He had a fantastic downfield pass to Brock Bowers where Bowers runs an incredible route, rounding around the outside of the defender. Bowers drops the ball. I mean,
is this the penalty? It's almost a spectacular one-handed catch, but they draw a penalty flag early in the game. Is this the one you're talking about?
No, but I should mention that one too. So you're
we'll leave this in for no. We'll leave this in.
You have Bowers on the deep pass, beautifully drawn up play. Again, not the coaching staff's fault. Beautifully drawn up play. Gardner Minshew makes the perfect pass. Bowers pulls it in with both hands because he is a great receiver who is working his tail off here. The defender has an arm in, does eventually pull it away as they roll around on the ground. It's a fantastic defensive play. The play from Bowers, the pass from Gardner Minshew was absolutely perfect. You have another one, Colm, that you had referenced where Bowers goes up with one hand, almost makes the play again, kind of has it stripped because he's being held down with his entire body and his other arm as the play is happening there. This is the weirdest benching that I've seen in a long time when Gardner Minshew is doing everything he possibly can do within the context of what the Las Vegas Raiders are. And then you go in with Desmond Ridder, who kind of little sneak attack on me there, referring to him as my guy. Desmond Ridder, I think there was some reason to have some interest at one point. We know that there's no reason to have interest now. Why is he on this team? He takes the 4 sacks. I definitely thought Ben and I joked on Stealing Bananas last week that Trey McBride and Brock Bowers were going to pull away from all tight ends in receiving yardage and not score again the rest of the season. Colm, they both score this week. The most unlikely play of all of week 9 was the garbage time touchdown to Brock Bowers because, I mean, Desmond Ridder is so far away from being a viable NFL quarterback. I mean, it hurts to watch what the Raiders are doing right now. I mean, you want to make the right decisions for your team, but there is so much scapegoating going on here. I would just have a lot more respect for Antonio Pierce if he would take the blame himself. Like, fall on your sword. You are the problem. Now, also the general manager and the ownership and the things that they have done over the last decade to hollow out this team. So you have Max Crosby and Brock Bowers, 2 of the greatest players in the NFL, and not much else. Your team is going to be terrible. You also approach the season as though your team was going to be terrible. Why are you now scapegoating everyone when exactly what it was expected to happen is happening? That's extremely poor leadership. I think you have to fire the head coach this week. There is the potential for the guys who are decent on this team, like a Jakobi Meyers, to have their performances further mitigated simply by the fact that Antonio Pierce appears to want Alexander Mattison flopping into the line for 2 yards per carry to be the only thing that they ever do. I mean, this is mind-blowing, really. The failure of leadership is stunning here. Take some responsibility for what has happened.
Yeah, the Raiders are really bad and in a bad situation, and the problem also is like where are they going to maybe give Ryan Tannehill a call, but he apparently wants to see if he can get a role with a contender, and that is not what the Raiders are. But when we look, Shawn, at the last couple of games here, we have the Cleveland Browns losing. They're kind of on this weird thing, they a bit like the Raiders, both have beat the Ravens this year, but they lose this one 27-10 to the Chargers, and obviously the score obviously improved very late on with an electric and amazing touchdown catch by Cedric Tillman in this one. Tillman, 6 receptions, 75 yards, 1 touchdown. Jerry Jeudy, 7 receptions, 73 yards, no touchdowns, both with 11 targets. They, dominating. But Elijah Moore, Shawn, has 9 targets, 3 receptions for 28, and Njoku, 7 targets, 5 receptions for 29 yards. But all in all, the running game didn't work in this one. Jameis Winston had 5 for 27, and the entire team combined had 24 for 79. So the running game struggled. Jameis Winston, while he had some nice throws, took 6 sacks for 22 yards. He had 3 interceptions. One of them, particularly the third one, was a spectacular defensive play where it's tipped down and then intercepted. But the Chargers controlled this one the entire way through. They're 20-3 up at halftime, and they kind of cruised through the rest of the game. J.K. Dobbins, Shawn, we're talking about your boys. J.K. Dobbins is one of those. He has 14 attempts for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also has 2 for 20 in the passing game. Ladd McConkey had 5 receptions for 64 yards. Josh Palmer, 2 for 63 and a touchdown. Both touchdowns kind of on busted plays here early in this one for Justin Herbert. But Shawn, Quinten Johnson, 4 receptions on 5 targets, 118 and 1 touchdown. That was a 66-yard touchdown on a busted play. Johnson, again, showing some flashes that things may be clicking into play a little bit for him, which is a huge positive for both the Chargers and for him himself. The other play that I would highlight, just that was a very fun play in this one, is at the end of the second quarter heading into halftime, Quinten Johnson catches the ball, goes in a long run, and they lateral it, which I thought for a second that they might have a chance to work it into the end zone after that, but it didn't work out. What's your key takeaways here from the Chargers? I did write at the start in my notes that Herbert's play recently has, been impressive, and then after I wrote that, Herbert's play from that point forward was not very impressive. He already had his 2 touchdown passes at that point and kind of struggled a little bit as the game went on. But in recent weeks, there has been some, impressive Justin Herbert play, but the second portion of this game wouldn't fall into that category.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a difficult passing matchup for Herbert. And yes, the Chargers go out fairly aggressively and take advantage of some broken plays on defense. As you mentioned, you get that 66-yard touchdown for Quinten Johnson. You get the long touchdown for Joshua Palmer. You remove those 2 plays, and Herbert wasn't impressive at all outside of that, but obviously those plays count. And so I think that Greg Roman, someone who people were not particularly excited about and yet has been a very competent NFL offensive coordinator, not everyone has to be the exact same in the NFL. I think that that's something that makes the games, less fun, or at least, drudgingly similar in some ways. If you do have everyone calling off of the exact same game plan and call sheet, it was cool to see them be able to exploit some of these breakdowns in the Cleveland secondary. The one miss that Johnston has, we'd really love to see him emerge to have that bounce back season. The big plays have been there, and this is what Johnston brings to the table. One of the things that the coaching staff of the Chargers talked about a lot in the offseason, which is that he was not used properly last year. You want to take advantage of his strengths, right? He's a vertical receiver. He's a run after the catch guy. He can give you a lot of dynamism. He probably lacks some of the traits to be a dominant every down, get 10 to 12 targets a game type of player. They're not using him that way. He's been very effective. The one target that is not caught is a play where, like, man, if he could just catch that one, like haul that ball in, that ball is on you, it would extend a drive. It would be a nice play. He's probably still not exactly there. But because of that, and because of the matchup, J.K. Dobbins is able to have a good game when it didn't look like that was going to be the case for a while. He was running in mud for quite a bit of this game, and yet both of the touchdown runs are impressive. You had a 17-yard touchdown, a 7-yard touchdown. You have a 34-yard long. In addition to that, he is fairly dynamic on the 2 receptions. Dobbins is a great fit, and the reason that he was such an exciting 0 RB type of candidate is that if it worked, which it is, the context was going to be fantastic in this offense. I don't know that we're going to get any kind of dominance. We are going to get occasional dynamism from guys like Johnston, McConkey, and Palmer. Maybe DJ Chark gives them another little bit of a vertical weapon. In terms of the way that plays out for the Chargers, it's mostly just about creating space for this running game and for J.K. Dobbins to do the work.
Yeah, and the last game, Shawn, I'm just going to let you share your thoughts on the Vikings and the Colts. And this started off as just a turnover fest as the game headed off. It was 7-0 to the Colts at halftime. Joe Flacco struggled, obviously, coming in for Anthony Richardson, 16-27, 1 interception, no passing touchdowns, 179 yards. Sam Darnold had 2 interceptions. He had 4 sacks for 30 yards, but he also threw 3 passing touchdowns, 290 yards for him. Justin Jefferson had 1 pass for 22 yards. Aaron Jones looked pretty good, Shawn, but nothing spectacular. Justin Jefferson looked spectacular, as you would expect. 9 targets, 7 receptions, 137. The interesting note here was, Addison has been difficult, as a managed roster season-long player this year. He has 5 targets, 5 receptions, 42 yards, and a touchdown. TJ Hawkinson back in the lineup. Josh Oliver, though, still leading the way at tight end. I would expect that to flip moving forward, but him being out there, I think, opened up some things for the rest of the offense. Oliver had a receiving touchdown as well, as did Jalen Naylor on his only target, 1 for 7 for a touchdown. Shawn, this game at points was just a massive mess. What is your key takeaway here?
Yeah, the Sam Darnold experience has been odd because he can occasionally make the plays. I think when you look at 28 for 34, almost 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, you look at what Justin Jefferson did. Justin Jefferson,
spectacular.
It's hard to even really fathom what he is doing. We finally got that Jordan Addison game that we were looking for. I think we're going to have more of that from this point. He is too good. TJ Hawkinson is too good. They're too multiple to be such a limited offense that has just been Jefferson and Aaron Jones. The flip side of that Darnold experience is that you get the 2 picks, you get the 4 sacks. He mostly looked overmatched in this game, despite the stats in a favorable perspective that he was able to put up. So I think that if you have Vikings, you've got to be pretty excited that even when Sam Darnold plays poorly like he did in this game, they're still able to get the fantasy numbers out. If you can get that game for Addison going forward, if you can get TJ Hawkinson more involved, which he probably will be, then you don't have to worry about it. You can even make the argument that some of these mistakes from Darnold will open things up because they'll have to be a little bit more aggressive. The Colts did everything they could do on defense. You hold Aaron Jones down completely. They shut him down. You force the mistakes for Darnold. You keep your team in it. But the Vikings defense was just too good. Outside of Josh Downs, this team doesn't really have anything in the receiving game right now. Michael Pittman, there was reason for enthusiasm with Flacco being the QB instead of Richardson. He gets the 4 targets, only 1 catch. That is absolutely demoralizing. The Vikings were also able to stop Taylor. This team is probably going to be a lot better than Flacco, but this isn't the game that the Indianapolis Colts coaching staff would have wanted to kind of tamp down on the controversy. It's been interesting when you consider just how bad Richardson has been. I mean, historically bad, that he still has a lot of people out there, especially when Justin Fields is uniquely condemned for being like the perfect version of what people are hoping that Richardson could be. Richardson has a lot of enthusiasts, and I think that's very understandable from a fantasy perspective. It's harder to understand from a reality perspective when you're getting those positive notes. Certainly what Richardson could do if you just say, we don't care about the reality results. I mean, he would still be exciting in fantasy. This isn't the game the Colts needed to get rid of the controversy or to put themselves in position to make a run at the playoffs. You have that horrible loss by the Texans on Thursday night where they look bad and they look like a team the Colts could come back on. This is a tough game. The Minnesota Vikings, 6-2 now. It's at the Vikings. The Colts probably shouldn't have won, and yet when you have a chance and Joe Flacco plays like this, I'm sure it's very tough for the coaches because they're probably coaching for their future. I mean, Shane Steichen is so good. He's not going to have any problems. But there's an opportunity here for the Colts. If they had stolen this game, which it seemed like they were going to for a while, then, I mean, they're coming hard on the heels of the Texans, which simply is not a good team right now. Unfortunately, I think this sets them back quite a bit.
And that's it for the second show of this week. We will be back later in the week with another show. If you are interested in signing up over at rotoviz.com to get access to the tools and all the content, you can use the code RBRadio2024 at checkout to get yourself a 10% discount off a RotoViz NFL Pass. My name is Colm Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at @OverToMartin. My co-host is Shawn Siegele. Check out all of Shawn's work up on rotoviz.com. And until we are back, have a good one.